Hey guys, my name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. It's everybody's favorite day, time for another episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, where we remind our friends, our GMs, people who are new to the hobby, that RPG actually stands for wow, that's a really powerful character, good God. Ever since my first pickup Pathfinder game, and anytime I go to a new group to play any RPG with them, be it Pathfinder, D&D, whatever the system may be, the conversation always comes up. Who's going to play the tank? Who's going to be the healer? I really feel that the World of Warcraft style parties just don't work in tabletop RPGs. And today, I'm going to present a party that can get the job done better than the traditional tank, healer, and damage classes forming a 5-man party, while still fulfilling all of those roles. Now let me be clear. The party composition I don't like seeing in Pathfinder is the classic tank, healer, and 3 random damage classes composing a 5-man party. I really feel that this kind of party structure just doesn't work the way that it's been drilled into our heads by MMOs. It may be great there, it may even be necessary there, but this game is a whole different animal, and that animal requires a whole different set of tricks. Now, when we say a tank class, what we mean is the class that stands up in front of everybody and absorbs all the damage, takes all the hits, and keeps the enemies occupied while the damage classes do the killing. Normally we see this in something like a paladin, a fighter, even monks or maguses, like I demonstrated in an earlier min-maxing video where we talked about heavy armor versus no armor. The list is pretty wide. Now, there are some feats and some spells that play into this concept, things like antagonize or various mind control spells we can cast to get the monsters or the bad guys or whatever it is you're fighting to attack you, but this is not a foolproof strategy. First off, coming from a guy who's playing a mesmerist once a week, there are a lot of things in this game that are immune to mind affecting effects. So if we try to mind control them into attacking us and ignoring the party, oftentimes those spells will fail. What's worse is the things that are immune to mind affecting effects are often the things we see and often the things we fight in games like Pathfinder. I'm talking about constructs, undead, outsiders, all these things. You try to use a mind affecting effect on them, it fizzles. Now, the feat Stand Still does exist, saying that when a foe provokes an attack of opportunity from moving past us, we can try to make a combat maneuver check, and if successful, the bad guy can't move for the rest of his turn. But this doesn't solve all of our problems. For one thing, we have to make a successful combat maneuver check for this to even work at high level play. That can be almost impossible, especially the bigger and bigger the creatures get. Also, there's nothing saying the bad guys can't dimension door past you, teleport over you, fly over you, swim through the ground under you, turn invisible, and get behind you. The possibilities are endless. So I really feel that the classic tank archetype just doesn't pan out in Pathfinder. Now, healers are an entirely different story in my opinion. Some people enjoy playing healers, and I have played them in the past. However, I feel the person playing the healer, unless they're just bound and determined that is what I want to do with this character, they're selling themselves short, and oftentimes, especially if they're doing this in pickup groups, they're selling themselves short in groups that are going to get upset if the healer isn't optimized to heal. We can refer back to my cleric optimization video and see that the cleric has plenty of great spell choices that have nothing to do with healing the party. So if someone comes in saying, I'm going to be a cleric, I'm going to heal the party, we're all good, the party's missing out on somebody who could do a crazy amount of damage. On top of that, if this is someone's first character, or even if it's their first time playing Pathfinder with this particular group, if they're expecting a certain kind of healer, and the player playing said healer doesn't live up to this expectation, that player ends up just being bossed around for the entire campaign, running around, dealing with people's needs, and that's not what tabletop role-playing games, in my opinion, are supposed to be about. In real life, most of us have to do that all day as we listen to our bosses at work, driving us around our offices or our warehouses or wherever it is we happen to be employed. When we come to the table, we shouldn't have to deal with this. Thus, I feel that the healer archetype can be used successfully, but isn't fair to the healer. Ergo, unless a player specifically says, I want to play the healer today, we should kick this archetype to the curb. The damage characters can be the worst complainers of all. When I say a damage character, I'm saying something like an arcane spellcaster, a rogue, a ranger, anybody who doesn't have a whole lot of hit points and isn't made to take a whole bunch of damage, but can dish out a whole bunch of damage with things like spells or sneak attack or studied target from the Slayer, painful stare from a mesmerist. The list goes on. But when these guys start dying in a group where we have a definitive I am the frontline character or a definitive I will take care of everybody's wounds character, I've seen players get pretty upset at both the frontline and the medical line when things go south. They feel it was the fighter or the barbarian or the paladin's job to catch all these attacks, and when he doesn't and he's running all over the place trying to save everybody and characters start dying, he catches the ire of the players. By that same notion, if the cleric is focusing all of his spells healing the quote-unquote tank, and your archer starts taking damage because somebody got wise to the amount of damage said archer can do in a round, the cleric finds himself really stretched for spells, runs out faster than he normally would, and then he catches all this ire for not playing a quote-unquote good enough healer. Tabletop role-playing games are not massive multiplayer online role-playing games. The differences are almost night and day in my mind. Rather than have the typical tank, healer, damage class in a 5-man party, we're going to talk about a 5-man party that can keep themselves and their friends healed, mitigate damage, control the battlefield, and get stuff done without relying on old trains of thought. Of course, this is just one way to do this. There are a million ways to skin this particular direwolf, and of all the things I've ever talked about on Black Dragon Gaming, this is what I want to hear the most input about. One of my favorite things about tabletop role-playing games is going to the lab and building things like this, both as a player and as a game master. I love putting the numbers together, figuring out what spells synergize well with certain classes that don't have spells. It's a lot of fun for me, almost more fun than the actual execution. I love brewing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and say now, if you have any ideas on how to make this better or have done it in the same vein to any level of success, please throw it in the comments. I want to hear all about it so I can stick it on my players. Now let's get down to the lab, shall we? We're throwing the old healers and tanks archetype out the window. We want to build something more like a SWAT team, more like the Avengers, who surgically enter an encounter, end it as quickly as possible, and move on about their day. Let's start with the tank. Like I said, the reason the tank doesn't work is because the tank can't effectively control a battlefield the way you expect him to in things like World of Warcraft. So we're throwing out the tank and we're going to replace him with an archetype I call the Punisher. Now, when I say archetype, this is not like a barbarian quote-unquote Punisher. A quote-unquote Punisher can be played pretty much any way you want, but the goal here is to build a character to occupy the front line, do as much damage as possible, and punish people for doing things that he doesn't want them to do. Now, it's no secret that I really love Gestalt characters, but for this video, we're going to focus on a pure one-class, untemplated race sort of build, because if we start throwing a bunch of templates and 2-class combinations on this, then there's no point in arguing about who's going to play the healer. We can all just Gestalt Cleric X, and we're perfectly fine. Our Punisher can be built a lot of ways. This Punisher is going to be built as a Titan Mauler Barbarian. We're choosing the Titan Mauler for a couple of reasons. First, for an all-important feat, which we'll talk about very shortly, we need to have a full base attack progression, and the Barbarian has that. Secondly, at 14th level, a Barbarian gets a little thing called Titanic Rage, which allows them to gain the benefits of Enlarged Person whenever they enter a rage. Now, most of the time, for a Punisher build, I would recommend being as large as possible for reasons I will describe shortly, but you never know when your party's going to need to enter a small room or a tiny little crawl space, and if the Punisher can't get where he needs to go, then he can become stymied incredibly fast. The Titan Mauler, giving us the ability to toggle our Enlarged Person, lets us have what we need without worrying about any potential drawback. Now, the feat that makes this guy work is called Combat Patrol. As a full round action, you may set up a Combat Patrol, increasing your threatened area by 5 feet for every 5 points of your base attack bonus. Until the beginning of your next turn, you may make attacks of opportunity against any opponent in this threatened area that provokes attacks of opportunity. You may move as part of these attacks, provided your total movement before your next turn does not exceed your speed. Any movement you make provokes attacks of opportunity as normal. So the idea here is to get our Titan Mauler a reach weapon, which gives us a range of 10 feet. Enlarged Person doubles that, putting us at a threat range of 20 feet, plus the lunge feat extends that another 5, putting us at a threat range of 25 feet, or 5 squares around us. Combat Patrol increases that by another 4, so a large character is looking at a threat range of 9 squares around him when using Combat Patrol, and he can move as part of these attacks, and in doing so, moving that humongous 9 square threat range. So the idea for our Punisher when combat starts is to get him smack in the middle of all the bad guys and just start wailing on them with this giant pole arm. We're choosing a Naginata, tell you why in a second. Just start beating on people, making sure to keep the archers, the spellcasters, anybody doing anything that would provoke an attack of opportunity in your threat range. Now, this does not say that they're going to attack you, but should the archer decide to shoot at someone behind you, it provokes an attack of opportunity. Should the caster fail the cast defensively check and try to fireball over you, it provokes an attack of opportunity. And if you're fighting a lot of casters, Punisher can just hold an attack action to wail on the caster when he starts to cast. The amount of damage you're going to do almost certainly disrupts the spell. This build could also function just fine with something like a Blood Rager. And in a world where you might take the accelerated drinker trait, or you're sure your GM will never build too small of houses for large characters, I might suggest playing a Blood Rager instead of a Barbarian who can just get a permanent enlarged person on himself, so we can get that extra 2 levels of Paladin, allowing us to add our Charisma modifier, which we just make sure to skyrocket into our saves. In either case, whether we're a Barbarian or a Blood Rager, I always recommend taking at least 1 level of Swashbuckler. Opportune Parry and Riposte is an incredibly strong ability, especially on something like a Barbarian who's going to be buffing his attack rolls. His ability to attack better than everything around him, coupled with Opportune Parry and Riposte's ability to shut off an attack and then get a free attack yourself at whoever attacked you, is incredibly powerful. Now, with a reach weapon, somebody can get within 5 feet of us inside the threat range of our weapon to do damage to us. So our Punisher needs to be something along the lines of a Skinwalker, Kitsune, Tiefling with a bite, Catfolk, anything that has a natural attack that does not have reach, to make sure we have something to parry with when somebody gets up in our face. Now let's talk about our healers. Having someone spec to heal can be a great thing if that player wants to play that certain kind of class, but it's also perfectly feasible for everybody to just take care of their own healing. I know, crazy concept. In such a way that you don't need to leadership in or rope a player into playing some kind of healing class. My favorite way to do this is the Determination enchantment. It's a +5 enchantment and will set you back some gold, but once per day when the owner reaches 0 or fewer hit points, the item with the Determination enchantment automatically casts Breath of Life on whoever's wearing the armor with the Determination enchantment. Breath of Life cures 5d8 points of damage +1 per caster level. In this case, I'd probably say it's the level of whoever's wearing the armor. So we're looking at the end of the game, 5d8 plus 20 health anytime you would drop to dying. Unlike other things like Cure Light Wounds, Breath of Life can bring someone back to life. If cast upon a creature who has died within 1 round, you can apply the healing to the creature, and if it brings them above the negative HP level that would kill them, they come back to life and stabilize. So if our Punisher accidentally gets crit and goes down to negative hit points or just flat dies, the Breath of Life enchantment triggers. This enchantment can bring us back up. Oh, speaking of random crits, I also highly recommend the Heavy Fortification enchantment. The Fortification enchantments start at low end and run all the way up, and they give us a scaling 25, 50, and what we want, 75% chance to negate a critical hit or sneak attack that is sent our way. So if you're playing in a group where the GM likes to throw lots of guys with elven curved blades, katanas, scimitars, fun stuff like that at you, or a lot of invisible rogues at you, a 75% chance to turn a crit into a normal hit can save your life time and time again. Easily the best armor enchantment, in my opinion, in this game that isn't a flat enhancement bonus. Now, putting the heavy fortification enchantment as well as the determination enchantment on a suit of armor consumes all 10 points of enchantment that we're allowed to have on a given suit of armor. If your GM will allow you to wear a shield on your back that has the heavy fortification enchantment, or maybe put armor enchantments on something like your clothes, a ring, gauntlets, some other item slot, I suggest you do so, because an enhancement bonus to our armor class is never something to shake a stick at. Now, one thing that's important to remember is no matter how well we prepare for a combat, the Game Master can always prepare that much better. So I always recommend that every character purchases the boots and the helm of teleportation. The helm of teleportation can be worn over top of your headband of mental perfection, so there's no reason not to do it. And both of these items give us the ability to teleport 3 times per day, as if you had cast the teleport spell, which adds up to 6 teleports a day. In case things go bad, click your heels, Dorothy, head back to the temple, or the base, or the SS player character's ship, wherever it is, the party has their base. If things go bad, head back there. Find an NPC who's capable of healing you, and then teleport yourself right back in the next round. Of course, if we abuse this too much, the local clerics at the Church of Iomade may start charging just a little bit more for their healing, so it might be wise to pack a little extra gold with you. However, with these precautions, we don't necessarily need a healer. We can take care of it ourselves, and we can always buy potions to administer to ourselves. Take the accelerated drinker trait or play a race with a tail like a tiefling or a Venara, so we can drink these potions a little faster or give them to our friends a little faster without disrupting our action economy. Now, with the healer spot freed up, that gives us an additional player to devote to the damage. So for this particular SWAT team, we're going to do 2 characters playing one concept and 2 characters playing another to maximize their effectiveness. First off, to back up the Punisher, we're going to play 2 wizards specializing in battlefield control. The idea here is when we're sneaking up on the encounter, we make sure everyone is invisible, so even Ugg the Titan Mauler can sneak up on somebody without being completely inept. And when the battle actually starts, we concentrate on battlefield control effects like haste, slow, and more importantly, mass hold person or mass hold monster. These 2 spells are why we're giving our Punisher a Naginata. The Naginata is a beautiful little reach weapon that does ×4 damage on a critical hit, much like a scythe. So when our crowd controllers are succeeding casting mass hold person or mass hold monster as the situation warrants, making people paralyzed, making them vulnerable to a coup de grace inside our gloriously gigantic threat range, we can essentially get a free ×4 critical hit on our paralyzed opponent, who almost certainly fails that fort save unless you roll really bad or he nat 20s most of the time. We're not necessarily going to crunch numbers for how much a gigantic Naginata can crit for, but even if you were to only do 30 damage on your critical hit, and I'm betting you're going to do more, that's a DC 40 fort save to survive, which a lot of things are going to have problems doing. The biggest reason why our crowd control character is not a divine caster and thus someone who couldn't just spontaneously cast cure spells is that hold person and hold person mass are cleric spells, but hold monster is not. As you level up, you're going to be fighting humanoid opponents most likely a whole lot less. Now granted, along with this, as we scale up, we're going to see things such as dragons that are immune to paralysis, so this is not always the most effective. However, things like haste and slow almost always are. If we can hand our Punisher and the 2 characters I'm about to describe an extra action and take actions away from the bad guys, we can turn the tide of battle in our favor incredibly fast. The last 2 characters in our SWAT team are going to be switch hitters. one can never predict, aside from maybe, having the crowd control guys casting scry, exactly what battlefield we're going to be fighting on. Maybe it'll be a vast open plain, maybe it'll be in the bottom of some cultist temple, maybe it's going to be in the sky with only a couple of floating platforms for our characters to stand on. Our switch hitters ensure that no matter what, we are always prepared for the situation, and we always have 2 high damage dealing characters ready to respond to anything. Now, there's plenty of ways to dish out a whole crap ton of damage in this game. My favorite, bar none, is the Ubercharger. Our Ubercharger needs some sort of ranged option as well. So for this build, we're going to recommend 2 Soha monks for our switch hitters. As we all know, I really like taking a couple of paladin levels to boost our saves. The Soha is an exception to that rule. The capstone for a Soha lets them treat their initiative at all times as if they rolled a natural 20, aka you are going first forever. In addition, even if they're unaware of things surprising them, they may always act in the surprise round. These guys are our opening salvo. We have the crowd control guy cast invisibility on all of us and sneak up as close as we can, and then have our switch hitters initiate a surprise round. Of course, in a surprise round, one can only take a standard or move action, so we can't full attack flurry with our longbow, we can't full attack charge with our lance, but what we can do is something like throw a necklace of fireballs in. Now, unlike the other Ubercharger characters like paladins, cavaliers, hunters, even some druids could pull it off, monks don't get an animal companion as part of their class feature. For this reason, we will need to take the leadership feat to make this work. Like I said in our Ubercharger video, we choose a mount that is appropriate for our world. If we're dealing with a lot of underwater combat, we take something that can swim. If we're dealing with a lot of open air, we take something that can fly. And if we're dealing with lots of dungeons, we need something small that can actually go into the dungeon instead of being parked outside while the person who leadershiped in this mount gets the job done. For this reason, and for the same reason that our Punisher is going to be playing a class that can go from size category medium to a size category large virtually at will, our switch hitter needs to be something size category small, whether that be the Orang Pendak, a halfling, a rat folk, a gnome. The choice is pretty much yours. We just need to make sure that thing that we're mounted on can fit in all the areas that we're going to. Now, there's plenty of reduce animal shenanigans that we can make permanent on something like a Pegasus to make some sort of pony Pegasus, as well as magical items that grant flight that we could cast on our pony to make something like a pony Pegasus. However, Pathfinder does have rules for leadershiping in stronger monsters, and for this reason, our switch hitters are going to be leadershiping in dragons, specifically young brine dragons. These lawful neutral dragons at the young age category are size category medium, whereas most dragons are size category large. This gives us a mount that has a swim speed as well as a fly speed, and obviously has a little more in-combat options that he can perform, as opposed to just something with wings. GMs handle mounts in different ways across every single table. If your GM will allow an intelligent leadership mount to take class levels, that blows the lid off of this entire video, and we don't even necessarily need to bring in the crowd controllers. We can just have those dragons take sorcerer levels. We also have 2 extra spots that we can reasonably fill in with a healer without alienating a player and without wasting a damage spot. But we're going to assume that our GM is a little more restrictive and will allow us to take just a young brine dragon with no alteration to its stats at all. With that in mind, our mount goes from a high-level death machine to something that is CR7 and only has an armor class of 20. That means across the entire build, not a whole lot is as important as remembering to make sure that our brine dragon is decked out with stuff that's going to increase his armor class. In addition to that, the monastic mount Soha ability lets us grant temporary hit points equal to twice our level to our mount, as well as our armor class bonus, our spell resistance, evasion, our key strike as long as we have 1 point, perfect self, still mind, all this sweet stuff that the monk gets, we can transfer to the dragon. If we let these guys die in the first couple rounds of combat, then the class that we're bringing in to be able to respond to almost any situation gets flipped on its head pretty fast. Do not, no matter what you're playing, neglect your mount. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on how these classes function, but by and large, all of them have been denoted in previous min-maxing for fun and profit videos. If you need any tips on how to build an Ubercharger, how to build a Soha, the Titan Mauler can be found more or less in our Ultimate Vital Strike build. We have plenty of spell optimization videos up. Refer to those. They'll help you get the rest of the way here. Now let's, for example, say whatever bad guy your party needs to take out is holed up in some sort of castle that prevents teleportation. Our party can't just teleport in and start a surprise round, so instead we have our crowd control guy cast invisibility on the 5 of us. We sneak up to the castle and we see that the courtyard is guarded by, let's say, 10 soldiers. After casting Fly on the party to get over the walls, our Punisher gets ready to dive in, and our switch hitters start the surprise round by firing Deeper Darkness into the courtyard. When the initiative begins, our switch hitters roll natural 20 automatically on their initiative. They charge down with their lances, and suddenly 2 guys are straight up off the board. Our Punisher charges down into the middle, starts swinging away on people, doing the damage that a high-strength barbarian with a 2-handed weapon can easily do, and our crowd control guys start working on paralyzing the various mooks that are dealing with, assuming they can't fly themselves, the only person they can reach after our switch hitters have flown out of the courtyard, setting up for another charge, our Punisher. As they're trying to do this, they're certainly running through his threat range, and with combat reflexes, they're provoking wave after wave of attacks of opportunity. In addition, the Rage Power Come and Get Me says attacking me provokes an attack of opportunity, and Opportune Parry and Riposte says I get the ability to try to stop your attack. If I stop it, I get a free attack. These can add up incredibly fast. We're getting more attacks than they are, we're doing more damage than they are. That wonderful little thing is called action economy. Let's say in the first round, our battlefield control guys are able to paralyze 5 people. Only 3 of them are set up inside the Punisher's threat range. He coup de grace one of them. Assuming he didn't kill anyone in the first round, we're down 3 guys. When the initiative starts back over, our Lancers come back down, kill 2 more, or if they find these guys have a lot of hit points, focus their fire or focus their charge on a single target, killing at least 1, for the sake of brevity, 2. Our Wizards at this time can haste the party, they can slow the bad guys, they can work on disintegrating the gate or part of the castle wall in case we need to make a retreat. Again, we can't teleport here. The crowd control guys just do what they need to do to keep the battle in our favor, while the Punisher is wailing on people, and when it comes around to him, coup de grace or setting up combat patrol as the situation warrants. In a few rounds, these guys have reduced the enemy to half their numbers, and once we're set up, once we've got our rotation, and once people start falling to paralysis, it's not going to be long before a situation like this is resolved. Now let's compare this scenario to a scenario where we have a tank, healer, and 3 damage. Our quote, traditional party. Yes, it is possible in Pathfinder to take our armor class and throw it into the stratosphere. I enjoy doing so. But doing this does not necessarily mean we will have the ability to force somebody to attack us. In addition, for a cleric to be able to heal, even with metamagic feats, they have to be pretty close to cast their cure spells, and we only have so many mass heals that we're spamming just for the sake of our tank. So our traditional sword and board tank is not able to as effectively control the battlefield or punish people for doing something other than face him. His presence means the cleric has to be almost right on top of him, which also puts the cleric immediately in harm's way. Now, what happens if our damage classes, say a sorcerer, a ranger, and a bard, because I like bards, why not, have somebody drop out of invisibility right on top of them? The healer has to suddenly run over to the damage classes, take care of them, probably provoking attacks of opportunity as he does so, and also neglecting the tank. The cleric then, after helping heal the damage classes, has to run back to the tank to keep him from dying, again provoking as this happens. Effectively, the cleric cannot be in 2 places at once. In our other scenario, if something gets the drop on our switch hitters or our switch hitters' mounts should die, they are able to heal themselves. They have an enchantment that will give them a buff in case they die. They're carrying potions to heal themselves or to heal the Punisher should he happen to drop. And they're also perfectly capable of running out of the area where they cannot teleport, teleporting out, getting what they need for the situation, and teleporting back in. This party is much more prepared for a combat situation, and yes, we can optimize a fighter cleric build for our traditional WoW style of game. However, it's much harder to make it anywhere near as effective. Now, I'm not ashamed to admit that in my younger days when it was new, I played a whole lot of World of Warcraft. And I did really enjoy the combat roles of a tank and a healer. Just because I don't think they're the best fit in the world for Pathfinder doesn't mean I don't think they can be fun. And if you have a way to optimize it, let me know in the comments right alongside all the guys that have great SWAT team style builds for combat. I'm really curious to see how we do stuff, how we can build super optimized encounters, because not only can those be super fun from a player aspect, every GM out there that comes to Black Dragon Gaming and sees the comments will have suddenly developed a brand new encounter to throw at his players. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos. The next min-maxing video drops next Wednesday.